On the record in the matter of the people of the state of Michigan versus Kenneth Love, file number 21-027880 Council of Kent.
Thank you, Honor. Aaron Housefield on behalf of the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. Excuse me, John Abbott representing Kenneth Love is present and standing to my right.
Today's date set for preliminary examination. How are we proceeding?
Thank you, Honor. It's my understanding that Mr. Love is rejecting the offer and electing to have the preliminary examination.
Okay.
No, I was gonna have it. I was just trying to figure out.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask you
I'm
to
sorry.
speak out.
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
What was the offer?
Thank you, Honor. The offer was to plead as charged count 2 domestic violence with some terms that there would be a stipulation that there would be a Killebrew to a term of probation with a recommendation of substance abuse and or mental health screening, and that he would follow all treatment recommendations as a result. In consideration for that plea, Your Honor, the people would move to dismiss the felony in count 1.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Abbott, you discussed that with Mr. Love?
We did briefly, Your Honor, and apparently he's reconsidering his earlier answer.
Okay, so Mr. Love, you want to take this offer?
Yes, ma'am. I was, and the reason I didn't answer right then, because I was really trying to understand, because we didn't get a chance to meet during the week, so I wasn't prepared, and it was like,
Okay.
everything was just,
Do you need more time to talk to your attorney?
probably just like,
A couple more minutes?
yeah, a couple minutes. That's it.
Okay, we're off the record. Okay, we're back on the record in the matter of Kenneth Bernard Love. Council appearances were already placed on the record. Mr. Love needed an additional opportunity to talk to his attorney. Mr. Abbott, is he going to be taking the plea?
Yes, Your Honor, he'll be pleading to domestic violence.
Okay. It was a killer brew for him to do a term of probation with screening for substance abuse and mental health treatment, correct?
Yes, Your Honor, and to follow all recommendations that would come as a result of that screening. And in consideration for that plea, Your Honor, the people would be moving to dismiss count 1.
Okay, Mr. Love, please stand up, please. Did you want to accept this offer today, sir?
Ma'am.
Please speak up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you had sufficient opportunity to discuss this with your attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give us the truth and the whole truth under penalty of perjury. Okay. Mr. Love, you have the right to proceed to a trial in this matter, and you have the right to have a jury trial. If you were to proceed to jury trial, you'd have the right to have the prosecutor bring enough evidence to prove each element of the charge against you beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that? Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if you want to accept the offer today and plead guilty to count 2 of domestic violence, you would have to give up your right to have your trial. You will not have a trial of any kind. Do you understand that?
Okay.
That means you're going to be waiving or giving up your right to question or cross-examine any of the witnesses that the prosecution was planning to call. You'll give up your right to call any of your own witnesses or present evidence to further any defense you may have. You'll give up your right to remain silent at trial and not have silence be used against you. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Can you speak up because the court has
Yes,
to hear
ma'am.
you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I have an advice of rights and plea information sheet here with today's date on it. Is that your signature?
Ma'am.
Did you read this document?
Yes, I want to, yes.
And you understand the rights listed there?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
You have any questions regarding any of these rights?
Well, I wouldn't have a question. I just, the information that he gave me, but as far as what would happen as far as if I pleaded guilty to, I kind of, and that's why I kind of.
Right, so this goes over rights that you're waiving, the rights that you have and the rights that you would waive in order to accept the plea. So you understand that? You want to waive those rights?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are you currently on probation or parole?
No.
Okay, you understand that a conviction may require you to report this conviction to your current employer or a future job?
Yes. I'm unaware of, but if that's what it has to do, then.
Okay. Is anybody making any promises to you to get you to waive your rights and plead guilty?
No.
Okay, is anybody threatening you to waive your rights and plead guilty? Okay, there's a killable agreement. So that's an agreement about your sentencing between you and the prosecutor. The court is not a party to that agreement, okay? So if at the time of your sentencing, if I decide I'm going to do something other than that, let's say put you in to serve a jail term, I will allow you to withdraw your plea, okay? You understand that? Okay, do you have any questions?
Just oh yeah. Well, yeah. This is what I want. It's a question about my girlfriend. I just want to bring up a question.
Okay, well, I'm asking if you have a question about this plea. We're not doing- Okay, thank you. As to the count 2 of domestic violence, how do you plead?
Okay.
On a factual basis.
Thank you. Mr. King, can you recall the events of August 15th of this year? Were you at a place 535 Edgewood Boulevard in Lansing?
Yes.
Were you there? And that's an apartment where you were living?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
And that you were living there with Melissa?
Yes, sir.
And you and she had a domestic relationship? You've been together for some time?
Yes, we've been together since 2019.
And that apartment there is on Edgewood Boulevard in Lansing, Michigan, right?
Yes, sir.
Which is in Ingham County, Michigan.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you and Melissa got into an argument?
Yes, sir.
And during that argument, she had a phone in her hand?
Yes, sir.
And you knocked the phone out of her hand? Or you grabbed the phone out of her hand?
I knocked it, yeah. Yes, sir.
And that was not with her permission?
No, sir, it wasn't.
And that contact wasn't something she invited, and you weren't doing that for self-defense?
You mean like,
She wasn't attacking you?
no, she
Okay,
wasn't. No, she
so,
wasn't.
and that was against her will, you took that phone?
Well, yeah, yes, sir. But at the time, I had on shorts, and I was trying to get in the house to get the change clothes, because I'm like really used to this cold weather, sir. And I was trying to put some long pants on.
Okay, but as far as the assault that happened, during this argument, you grabbed the phone.
Grabbed the phone, yeah.
And that required contact with her hand? Came into contact with her?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Okay, any additional questions, Ms. Housefield?
I would just like to clarify for the record so that it's clear that Melissa would be Melissa Jackson, Your Honor. Otherwise, the people have no further questions.
That's Melissa Jackson you were living with?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. The court is also satisfied with the factual basis. I'll accept your plea. Find your plea to be made freely, voluntarily, and intelligently. This matter will be set for sentencing. The sentencing date is going to be January 14th, 2022 at 8:30 in the morning. Prior to sentencing, you have to meet with probation so they can provide the court with a pre-sentence report and recommendation, and you can undergo a substance abuse assessment, okay?
Do you know where I will be at that time?
I know where you'll be in January. No, I don't. Do you
No,
know?
I mean not January. I mean, like, will I be like released today or anything?
Are you being held on anything other than this?
Any other cases?
No.
Okay, if this is the only thing holding you, we can address bond in a moment, but the bond looks like it was at 10% previously. But nonetheless, you need to meet with probation prior to that. If you're no longer in the custody of the jail, you're gonna have to report within 48 hours, okay?
All right. So
Probation.
can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Okay. Now, even though we had a situation, me and her are not at each other though. You know what I'm saying? She can take. But what I wanted to ask is, you know what I'm saying, is there's a possibility that I could go back and live with the problem if she said if
No.
she doesn't mind?
No. Madam Prosecutor? No.
Being prepared to address the court, Your Honor.
Oh,
You just pled guilty to domestic violence with this person as the alleged victim.
I mean, yeah, I pled guilty, but I didn't want to plead guilty. I want to plead.
I actually, were you pleading guilty because you wanted to plead guilty?
No, I got some. No, I pled guilty because I was under the impression that I could be released.
But no, that was not. I asked you, were there any promises or threats to get you in to want to waive your rights and plead guilty? You don't plead guilty because you want to get out. You plead guilty because you are guilty, which was a question. So are you now saying that you are not pleading guilty because you believe you were guilty?
No, I ain't saying that I wasn't.
Okay.
No, I'm saying that the things on there aren't all there. They aren't true. Some of the things happen.
But the factual basis, which was laid out, involved an assault between you and someone you had a domestic relationship with. So at this time, the court is not amending the no contact order, which is what I am assuming you're requesting. That will not happen. Okay. Any other questions?
Last thing. So, will I be able to go to the apartment and get my things out of there?
If you are released from custody, you can go to make arrangements to get your belongings. I believe that is part of the original no contact order. It was not. I'll put here that you can go once accompanied by a peace officer to remove your personal items. That means clothes and medication or anything like that.
Well, about like my gaming system, stuff like that.
If you have a gaming system.
Yeah, game systems. I have game system sound. Yeah. But then and that's another thing too. That's what I was trying to understand. See, I don't know the time frame and that allow you to do that because
I don't either. The court's not going to give you a time frame.
No.
Talk to your attorney about that.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions for the court about what you're going to do between now and sentencing?
Yeah, I have a question, but I'm still.
About what you need to do for the court between now and sentencing.
Yeah, but
Okay, what is the question?
and that's what I was asking. If I'm going to be released, then I'm going to try to do something up until then. But if I'm not going to be released, I mean, you know.
Well, we haven't addressed the bond. So have you asked your attorney to address bond?
No.
Yes. I will
Okay,
be.
so then you need to allow him to do that.
Okay.
But my question for you is, do you have any questions for the court?
No.
Okay. So you need to make sure you report to pretrial, not to pretrial service. You need to make sure you report to probation within 48 hours of your release if you have not been evaluated before you are released from custody. Do you understand that?
So and that's another thing. So where would I report to probation?
Probation is on the 5th floor of this building.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other questions about your reporting to probation so they can provide the court with this report? Because if you come here on the 14th without a report completed, I can guarantee you'll be remanded to jail. You understand that?
But that's what I'm saying. How I don't even have transportation. I got it's a lot of things I have to figure out to.
I don't have any questions or I don't have any answers about your transportation. That's not for me to figure out. That's for you to figure out. I'm telling you that you need to meet with probation within 48 hours of your release so that they can schedule you to have a pre-sentence investigation done, is what I'm telling you. If you would maybe pay attention to what I'm telling you instead of trying to advocate for getting out, then you could listen to what I'm saying. You can figure out.
I'm not trying to advocate for getting out. It doesn't matter if I get out or not.
Don't interrupt her. All right.
Yeah, we don't go back and forth. Do you have an attorney standing next to you to represent you? Okay, let him do his job. You do yours, okay? Do you have any questions about what you need to do between now and the 14th of January, 2022? Okay. Any additional matters for the record, counsel?
Nothing as it relates to the plea or sentence, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
In regards to bond, Your Honor?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Love just pled to a misdemeanor. The felony's been dismissed. I asked the court to reduce the bond to a personal recognizance. Although it's a little unclear as to how well he understands what he needs to do between now and January 14th, I can assure the court that I'll make sure he understands what he needs to do, that he needs to go to the 5th floor, he needs to get an interview time with the probation department, and he needs to participate in an interview. He's a native of Arkansas, Your Honor, and he's got a mother in Arkansas. At some point between now and January 14th, I'm sure he's going to ask me to get permission for him to go to Arkansas. And so I guess I should raise that issue today rather than waiting to surprise us later. And as far as its current address goes, the only address he has in town is the Edgewood Boulevard address. So in spite of the fact that he doesn't have a place to
Where's he
release him to,
anticipating going then?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, Ms. Oswald?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have some concerns about him being released on bond pending the sentencing for the facts that were just stated and addressed by the court. He does not have sufficient ties to this community. He is not able at this time to provide the court with an address where he will reside if he is released. He certainly cannot return to the Edgewood address. That no contact order is still in place. And I know that the victim does not want further contact with him and does not want him moving back to the home. She is scared of any further contact with him. If he is released, I have a concern that he will flee to Arkansas. I have a question about whether he will return to this court for the sentencing and for any potential probation or sentence that the court may impose. So I will make those facts known to the court and leave it to the court's discretion. But given his inability to sufficiently address some of those concerns today, Your Honor, I do believe that it would be in the best interest of both his return to this court and the safety of the victim for him to remain in the custody of the Ingham County Jail.
Your Honor?
Yep.
I don't think it's necessary to presume that he's going to run. Just inform the court that that's who he is. If you give him just 48 hours or 72 hours to establish someplace to live and bring that to the court's attention as soon as possible, He's got employment skills. He's a forklift operator. He can find work immediately. He can find housing immediately. And I think his risk of flight is very low. He'd rather stay in Lansing. He came here on purpose, and I'd ask the court to allow him to the benefit of that doubt, Your Honor, that he will find a place to live and keep the court apprised of his location. Thank you.
Okay, this is a situation where Mr. Love, who's been before this court multiple times, there's multiple notes of the inability to even proceed because of lack of cooperation with proceedings in this matter. And because of that, because of the lack of sufficient ties to the Lansing community, the court's not comfortable with releasing him on personal recognizance bond. He's going to post something. I think the bond that was set, 10,000, 10%, is appropriate under the circumstances. If you could provide the court with another actual address where he would be staying, the court would consider that, but that's not even something that you can do. I'm not going to release him so he can maybe figure out a job and maybe figure out someplace, or maybe go back to Arkansas to his mom, which we've already alluded to that fact by saying that his mom is from Arkansas. He's going to request to go to Arkansas. So motion to amend bond is denied. Any additional matters for the record?
Nothing for the people, Your Honor.
Nothing at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. You're all set, Mr. Love. Okay, CRP, and is that the last we have?
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, that's a simple matter. That's fine.
Your Honor, if I may just have 2 quick minutes to just sort of update the victim, make sure that she's clear on what happened, and then I'll be right back in to run the next exam. Thank you. I do appreciate that, Your Honor.
Okay, we're on the record in the matter of the people of the state of Michigan versus Michael Albert Siafi Jr. File number is 21-02819. FY council appearance.
Thank you, Your Honor. Aaron Hoskins on behalf of the people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. John Abbott representing Mr. Siafi. He's present and standing to my right.
How are you today, Mr. Siafi? How are you?
Could be better.
Okay, I think I could be too, actually, but we're here. So today's the date and time set for preliminary examination. Are you ready to proceed?
The people are ready, Your Honor.
Defense is ready.
Okay, any preliminary matters?
Nothing for the people, Your Honor. Thank you.
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
Calling first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people would call to the stand Officer Catherine Jablonski.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're going to give is true to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
I do.
And you can have a seat here. And can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Catherine Jablonski, KATHRYN JOBLONSKI.
Counsel, you can proceed.
Thank you. Ma'am, are you employed?
Yes,
And what is your occupation?
an animal control officer,
Are you with a particular jurisdiction?
Ingham County Animal Control.
Thank you. And what are your duties as an Ingham County Animal Control Officer?
I'm sworn to enforce state laws and local ordinances pertaining to animals while protecting the animals and citizens within the county.
And do you have any particular training or certification as it applies to your role?
Yes, I'm NDARD certified.
And if you could just spell that, because we're going to have to make a record of it.
Michigan Department of Agricultural and Rural Development.
Thank you. And what is involved in that certification?
That certification is 100 hours of ride-along hours with animal control officers working in the courts, just observation hours.
Thank you. Now, on April 24th, 2021, were you on duty that day?
Yes,
And on that date, were you dispatched to 413 Hilewood?
yes,
And what city is that in?
Lansing,
Are you familiar with the Lansing city limits?
yes,
And is that location within the county of Ingham, state of Michigan?
yes.
And why were you dispatched to that location?
I was dispatched for a welfare complaint at the location.
And to be clear, welfare as it relates to animals,
Yes, ma'am.
were you given any details other than a welfare complaint?
Details of the animals living in unsanitary conditions and the animals not being provided water.
And did you proceed to that location?
I did,
Did you make contact with anyone?
yes.
And who did you speak with?
Michael Kioff, if I say it correctly.
Do you see that person in court today?
Yes.
And could you please indicate for the court what the gentleman by the name that you've just said is wearing in court today?
A black sweatshirt and a blue face mask.
Your Honor, thank you. May the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant, Mr. Siafi.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Identification is noted.
Thank you. And at the time that you arrived, ma'am, did you indicate for him why you were there?
Yes,
And did he allow you to come into and inspect the property?
yes.
Could you describe for the court what is 413 Hilewood?
It's a residential home.
Single family?
It's a double-story family home.
When you say double story, do you mean though that it is a single family in the sense that it's not an apartment complex or a duplex?
Correct.
Thank you. And did you observe any animals at that location?
Yes,
More than one?
yes.
I'm going to ask you, let's take the animals one by one so that we can establish some facts of your observations for each animal. Okay. What is the first animal that you came in contact with?
There was a pig in the front yard.
And could you describe the yard, please?
The yard was a small fenced-in yard. The pig had free range within the fenced-in chain link area. The pig did not have any shelter or water available to it.
And did you walk the area of the fence to determine that there was no shelter or water?
Yes.
And did you ask the defendant about shelter or water of the pig?
I did not ask him any about the shelter. I did advise him of the ordinance within the city limits of owning livestock.
And were there any other animals located on the exterior of the property?
No.
Okay. Did you proceed into the home?
Yes.
And what animal did you come upon first within the home?
There was one pit bull puppy free roaming in the house that I saw first.
And did you make any observations or notations of that animal?
The animal itself looked adequate. The animal had food provided, but no water provided.
When you say there was no water provided, did you find any evidence of a water dish?
There was a water bowl right next to the food bowl that was empty and growing bacteria or mold. When asked about the water dish available to the dog, the daughter said that it was in the sink to be washed. So a separate one from the one that I viewed on the park.
Did you confirm that statement by looking in the sink?
I saw dishes in the sink and then confirmed which one was the dish for the dog.
Thank you. Did you find any other animals within the interior of the home?
Yep. Next there's 2 rats in a large wire crate. One of the rats in that crate had a head tilt.
What is a head tilt?
And literally his head was cockeyed, tilted. It's just an indication that there's a medical concern going on.
And you know that based on your training?
Yes.
The certification that you described earlier?
Yeah, that's definitely not normal rat behavior.
Okay.
And the other one's head was normal. There was no food or water in that cage for them.
What, if any, animals did you come upon next?
There was another cage that Mr. Kiosk brought out with 2 more rats inside. There was no food in that cage. There was water, and the cage was littered with some feces inside.
You had the occasion to inspect a number of homes with animals, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, and I would imagine that feces in an animal area is a normal part of owning an animal, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Was there something about this level or amount of feces that you believed rose above what would be normal based on just an animal using the restroom? They have a restroom?
I wouldn't say beyond, above. Like there wasn't an extreme amount of feces that it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. I would say more to days it had been cleaned.
Days, plural, you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hard with the math sometimes. And did you come upon any other animals?
Yep, there was a single rat in a cage, had water, no food, feces as well as that in that cage as well.
And to be clear, these animals that you have just described, the puppy, the pit bull puppy, the large wire cage with 2 rats, a small wire cage with 2 rats, and then a single cage with a singular rat, where were all of these animals located?
These are on the main floor of the house.
Okay. And did you come across any other animals on the main floor?
No.
Okay. Did you proceed anywhere else in the home?
Yep, I went to the 2nd floor of the address.
Okay. And how did you get to the 2nd floor?
Through a stairway.
Okay. Did you make any particular notations about the condition as you proceeded up the stairs?
There's a couple pieces or piles of feces in the hallway stairway leading up to the 2nd floor.
Are you able to tell, based on your training and experience, what type of animal that feces came from?
I would presume it was from a dog.
Thank you. And did you, after proceeding up the flight of stairs, where did you go?
The main living area upstairs, they showed me a storage tote with gerbils inside.
Describe this tote, please.
The tote is like a storage container that you put the Christmas decorations in to store on the shelf at night. Storage container. In the container, there was 6 gerbils. They had bedding. There is no water and no food, and there is no air holes for any type of ventilation. And the top was closed on top of the storage tote.
Okay, and now when I think of a storage tote, I think of a hard plastic.
Yeah.
Is that what you're describing?
Yes.
Okay, and could you describe the size, if you recall?
It was probably 2 to 3 feet long and 2 feet tall approximately.
And I'm sorry, you indicated there were 6 gerbils in there?
Yes.
Thank you. And how is it that it was closed? Is it a latch? Is it a lid that just fits squarely on top of the bottom?
It's a lid that fits square on the top, on the bottom, and kind of clicks on.
And did you open the lid to inspect the animals?
Yes.
Okay, and when you opened the lid, did you hear what you've just described as a clicking? Did you hear a release of that clicking?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's your position that it was tightly fit at the time.
Yes.
And did you proceed to any other locations, ma'am?
There was a bedroom upstairs. It was the daughter's bedroom.
Did you make entry into that room?
Yes.
And did you locate any animals in that room?
There's 4 cats and 1 small dog in that room.
Taking the cats first, did you make any observations of their conditions?
Just the pure smell, just the cats themselves.
Or of the living conditions as it relates to the cats?
As it relates to the cats, there's a couple litter boxes in the room that had feces piled in it, feces scattered around it, and kind of smeared on the wall. There's a strong odor of ammonia in the room. The cats had food available to them, but no water. When I walked up to the water dish in the room, all the cats swarmed the dish and started actually fighting with each other. I think they were aware that I was going to give them water since I was standing next to their dish, and they were acting pretty thirsty.
And you indicated that you also located a dog in that room?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the dog?
It was a Chihuahua mix.
Did you make any observations of the dog?
He was missing some fur on his rear end, and he felt underweight as I could feel his spine and his ribs.
Did you have any conversation about whether the cats reside in that room or if they have free roam of the home?
I was under the impression that the cats are strictly into that bedroom.
After observing the number of animals that you've just testified to and the conditions, did you speak with Mr. Siafi about the animals?
Yes.
And what statements did he make to you?
He made statements that his kids acquire these animals against his permission, and he just doesn't have the means to keep up with caring for all of them.
And were any of the animals seized on this date?
All animals were owner surrendered.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time for this witness.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
I'm showing you a series of exhibits, like A through F, proposed defense exhibits. Could you look at those and see if you recognize them?
Yes, I do.
Are those photographs that you took?
Yes, sir.
And do those photographs accurately indicate the condition of the house that you observed that day
Yes.
at the time you took the pictures?
Yes.
Move for admission of defendant's exhibits.
Your Honor, may I just voir dire briefly?
Right.
Thank you. Ma'am, you were just asked by defense counsel and answered in the affirmative that those pictures adequately represent the conditions of the home. To be clear, as you look at a photograph, it is a photograph that is a portion of a room because you're only able to take a small portion of a room at a time. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that these photographs accurately represent what is depicted in them, but perhaps not the entirety of the home that may not be shown within the photographs?
Yes.
Thank you. I have, with that limited voir dire, Your Honor, I have no objection to these being admitted with that understanding.
Thank you. Defense exhibit, 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. And besides these pictures, you took about 40 other pictures?
I don't know how many, but a lot.
A lot of pictures. So
Yes.
if the court is interested, we can show you the entire house. We'll see. So let's start with this top one in the sequence of the way you described it. Could you tell us what that's a picture of?
That's a picture of the pig in the front fenced in yard.
And did he approach you when you came to the house?
Yeah,
He was a
Yes.
very friendly little animal
yes,
and seemed to be in good shape in
Yes.
terms of mobile, wasn't limping or anything.
correct.
And now you mentioned that at that time there was no food in the pen.
There was food in the
Oh,
pen.
there was
There's no
food?
water
Okay,
and no shelter.
but, all right. But there could have, you were only there for how many minutes?
I don't know the time I got there and the time that I left.
How long did you observe the pig?
Observed the pig approximately, as I walked through into the house, I observed the pig for approximately a minute.
Okay. And it's possible that he had been given water earlier in the day,
That's possible.
but you don't know. And this one?
Just to be clear, are we looking at B?
It's-
Are we going in order?
It was in the order that she described her visit to the
Okay,
house.
so the letter would be,
This
C.
is C.
I started with D, and this is C. Pardon me.
okay,
Can you describe what's in
thank you.
Exhibit C, please?
That is the pitbull mix puppy.
Okay,
Adrian, I believe the name was.
Adrian. And is that your leg that Adrian is sniffing right there?
Yes.
Okay. And you had some conversations with the family about Adrian,
Yes,
and he'd only recently arrived in the house,
approximately 1 month.
and he hadn't learned to be a house trained.
Correct.
So, although we don't know for sure, it's very possible that some of the feces, not all of them, that you saw in the house were Adrian's.
It's possible.
But other than that, would you describe his fur as a healthy fur?
Adrian's body condition was healthy.
And, like his eyes are clear and there's nothing seeping out of his ears or his nose or anything,
None that I saw.
no indication of disease. And similarly, with the pig, there was no indication of disease.
Correct.
And this is Defense Exhibit E. Can you tell us what that is?
That's a picture of two of the gerbils in the storage tote.
And although they weren't all posing for a group photo, do all the gerbils look similar to those gerbils?
Yes, I specifically took this photo to capture the condensation built up in the storage tote.
Right. But the gerbils have plenty of bedding
Bedding was not an issue.
and tunneling, they like to tunnel around and that stuff.
Yes.
And it wasn't particularly old-looking bedding, it was like somebody been paying attention to them in terms of providing for bedding.
It did have a strong ammonia smell inside.
Right. And that's from urine, right?
Yes,
But other than the strong ammonia smell and the condensation on the inside of the box, there was no indication that these animals were suffering from any disease,
any disease. I am not a veterinarian, so I'm not.
but they were hopping around and running around and
Yes, they were moving about.
capable little gerbils.
Yes.
Okay. And Defense Exhibit A.
This is a picture of, looks like 2 of the cats that were inside of the daughter's bedroom.
Okay. And looks like one of them is just lounging up on the corner of the bed,
Yes, sir.
and the other one is just jumping onto the bed.
Yes, that's what it appears to be.
So the cats were ambulatory,
Yes,
and their fur was in good condition.
yes,
You didn't see any indication of disease.
not from my time at the house.
Okay. And this is another exhibit F.
This one, another cat that was in the daughter's bedroom.
And similarly, you didn't identify, at least on your inspection that day, any indication that that cat was diseased or suffering from any maladies at all.
Correct.
But these are the cats that gathered quickly around you when you stood next to the water bowl.
Correct.
And as far as the cats, just like the rest of the animals, you don't know how long they've been staying in the house?
How long they've been inside the house?
Yeah.
Correct.
How long they've been members of the household?
I was told Felix was owned for about a week. Which
Felix?
is the little chihuahua in the bedroom.
Okay, and Felix and, what's the pig's name?
I can't even remember that.
The dog, the other dog's name?
Louis.
Louis.
Louis the pig.
Louis.
Felix and Louis arrived together,
I do not remember.
but only a week or so. And here's the exhibit B.
That is Felix, the little chihuahua that was inside the bedroom. This picture also has the litter boxes, with all the feces around on the carpet, around the litter boxes.
And Felix's tail is wagging so rapidly that it's not in focus.
Yep, Felix was moving about in the room.
Okay. And this is the daughter's bedroom
Yes, sir.
that contained all the cats and the gerbils and.
No, just contained 4 cats and 1 dog.
Okay, the gerbils were found elsewhere.
The gerbils were in the main living area of the
Okay.
upstairs.
Did I move for admission of those exhibits? You did, didn't I? And you volunteered, okay. So, when you were inspecting the animals, and talking to the family, you heard the story that one of the daughters had been online and she had been inviting people to drop off the animals at the house?
I don't know about inviting people to the house to drop off animals. He said that she was obtaining them in multiple different ways.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, I think she's 13-year-old, had started
I
collecting,
don't know her age.
but she had started collecting these animals? Yes?
Yes,
Okay. And Mr. Siapi was, when you got there, fairly eager to unload all the animals to you as rapidly as he could.
yes.
He handed you cages with rats in them. In fact, he surrendered all of them except a couple of cats, right?
No, he surrendered all.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I don't have any pictures of the rats, but the rats were similarly situated, as you described. One of them, there was a great picture I wish I brought. When you walked up to the cage, the rat jumped up and grabbed onto the bars and was like face to face with you. It looked like. He's a very friendly little animal
Yes,
and seemed to be healthy enough to jump up and hang onto the bars.
yes.
Okay. And was he one that had some water in his water tubes?
That one, no.
But the other ones did?
Yes.
And these cages that were being handed to you for transport are the ones you're describing with no water in them?
Trying to remember which cages I took for transport. I know the small cage with 2 rabbits or 2 rats in them had water.
Okay.
I know the single rat that was in the cage as well had some water. I think that was a cage I took as well.
No.
I think the big cage that had no water and no food, I transported the rats in a different cage.
So it was your testimony earlier, a few minutes ago, that there was one water bowl by the food dish, and then there was an allegation that there was another water bowl in the sink, but neither of them had any water. At least neither of those were providing water at that minute for those animals.
Correct.
And there were also, I noticed in the pictures, situated in the bedroom upstairs, there was dishes full of food.
Yes.
And you asked for rat food, and he gave you some rat food, and he said he had other rat food to give you?
Yes, sir.
So in terms of having food available for the animals, that was not a problem?
Yes.
And what concerned you primarily was the lack of water, right?
Yes.
And this was your first visit to the home?
Yes.
And so you had, for example, you could have, if he hadn't surrendered all the animals to you that day, would you maybe have said, look, you've got to give them water, and then like come back a few days later to see if he was actually complying with your orders?
I don't know what I would have done if things went differently.
But at least that way you would have been able to tell for sure whether or not they were at least occasionally given water?
If I gave him the option to give him
Yeah.
water, if I gave him the option to give him water, then yes, that would be a way that they are getting water.
But the way it is currently, you really don't know when the last time they received water was.
Based on other statements from individuals that were in the house with me at the time, I do remember that it was discovered the 2 rats in the biggest cage were without water for at least 15 hours.
And that was an estimate, actually,
That is an estimate.
based on
Based on
case
the,
worker saying, this was a social worker, right? A CPS worker or somebody?
correct.
Who showed up at the
Child
house and
Protective
she
Services.
said there was no water the day before.
She was at the address the day before at approximately 11 p.m. and she did not view any water in that rat
And
cage.
you showed up the next day
Approximately 2:30 in the afternoon.
and there's still no water.
Yes, sir.
But somebody in the household told you they had been given water in the interim, correct?
Not correct.
Not correct, okay. But it's possible that they had been given water in between then, you just drank it.
It is possible.
And did you weigh the dog that you picked up and said he was skinny? Did you weigh him?
No,
You know how old he was?
I think he was more of a senior dog, but I do not know his age.
And did you weigh any of the animals?
When they got back to the shelter, they were weighed by animal care staff.
Did you take any temperatures of any animals that day?
I personally did not.
And the rat with the head tilt, you know what became of him?
I do not.
Did you speak with the family about the head tilting rat? Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Seoff said that his head had been tilting for approximately 1 month. And admitted he didn't have the expenses to take him to the vet.
Okay, so the rat may have been suffering for a month
Yes,
with an ear infection or something.
yes.
Because that's typical of what an ear infection will do to a rat sometimes. It might have been something
I
else.
don't know that. I'm not.
What are you talking about?
veterinarian.
Not having enough money to take him to the vet?
Yes.
And as far as Mr. Siapi goes, I saw in your pictures, sorry about that, a picture of his CDL license.
Yes.
It's a commercial driver's license.
Yes.
He's a truck driver.
Yes.
So that occupation takes him away from home occasionally?
Okay.
Frequently?
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
I
It
guess
was.
you're not arguing with me.
Are you asking her if that?
I'm asking you.
Okay.
You understand that being a truck driver requires leaving home?
Objection, Your Honor, assumes facts not in evidence. We don't know. He may be a long haul, he may be a short haul truck driver, he may not be employed and driving at all. So I think that to ask this witness that line of questions assumes facts not in evidence, and he can certainly try to lay a foundation and see if she would have this information, but as it stands, I would object.
Did you want to wait for the foundation?
No, Your Honor. I'll withdraw the question about truck driving.
Thank you.
Mr. Siapi did say, however, that he would come home and find more animals.
And his daughter would bring animals
Yes.
regularly.
And he was against this.
Yes.
And he was happy to give them all to you.
Yes.
Got nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Just very briefly, ma'am, does Ingham County Animal Control have a process by which someone can surrender an animal unrelated to an animal control investigation?
Yes.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Thank you. You may be excused. You call any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor, not for the people.
Mr. Abbott, are you going to be calling any witnesses?
No, thank you.
Argument.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. In this case, the people have filed a complaint alleging 1 count of animals abandoning or cruelty to 4 to 10 animals pursuant to MCL 750.50 sub 4 sub C. It is alleged on this complaint that he did fail to provide 4 or more, but fewer than 10 animals with adequate care. if the court looks at the statute, that same statute at 1A, as well as the jury instruction of 21.42, adequate care is defined as meaning the provision of sufficient food, water, shelter, sanitary conditions, exercise, and veterinary medical attention in order to maintain an animal in a state of good health. There were far more than 4 to 10 animals described here, Your Honor. In fact, there were 18 animals located within the home and observed by Officer Jablonski, that home being at 413 Hilewood within the city of Lansing and county of Ingham. Even if the court takes the testimony of Officer Jablonski that many of the animals appeared not to be in poor health, this isn't a question of whether or not they were in poor health, but whether or not he had provided adequate care. Clearly, as the court heard the list of animals, there was not a single animal that had all things needed. Many of the animals were missing food. Many of the animals were missing water. The pig was outdoors with no sufficient shelter. So if the court takes, at a minimum, we have the 4 animals that are met, certainly high above that. And as Officer Jablonski indicated, he could have made arrangements to surrender those animals. I understand that it is the testimony or his statement to Officer Jablonski that his daughter is coming home with these animals, and he does not prefer that, but he has taken no steps prior to the involvement of the Ingham County Animal Control Officer to surrender those, indicating that the rat had been head tilting and that he did not have the proper funds to take it to a vet for approximately 1 month. So based on a probable cause standard, Gunner, and identifying the defendant, the people believe that it has met its burden and would ask that this matter be bound over to the circuit court.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think we're in one of those rare situations where even if you accept everything the witness says, you haven't heard any evidence of a felony. Counsel, I agree that the applicable statute is 750.50 and the requirement is adequate care. And you need to distinguish that from ideal care, Your Honor, or excellent care or perfect care. It needs to be adequate care, sufficient to maintain, quoting here from that 1A, sufficient to maintain an animal in a state of good health. There's been no testimony that any of these animals were in a state of poor health except for a rat who probably had an ear infection for maybe a month. If you look at the photographs of those animals, their fur is in good shape, their eyes are in good shape, they're active animals, they have good relationships with people. They came up and sniffed the officer's leg, they were wagging their tails when they saw him. If you look at the cats, they're lounging on the bed and running around. And they are in a state of good health. The gerbils are in a state of good health. They may have been snapped into a box for a few minutes that day, but certainly they were active, well cared for little animals in a box with plenty of bedding in the box for the gerbils. As far as the dog, one of the dogs, the older dog, the little white fellow named Felix, who had been there for some period of time, was a little skinny, but the statute requires that, in order for a determination to be made, if you look at 750.501M, there has to be a proper body weight evaluation and temperature for the age of the animal to decide whether he's actually being malnourished or not. And just, if it's an older dog and he's a little skinny, that doesn't mean he's being maltreated or abandoned or neglected. It's just the way dogs get when they get older. And as far as the issue of water, Your Honor, water is, certainly they've been getting water. They're all healthy enough to run around the way they were running around. They wouldn't be creating condensation on the inside of the box if they weren't exhaling water and urinating water. And they wouldn't be producing urine if they weren't drinking water. So there's plenty of evidence that they were getting enough water. And I think the fact that the cats, when she walked over and stood by the water dish and all the cats ran to the water dish, it means that they've learned that there's regularly water placed. When one of the humans walks over to that dish, they're going to get water. So that means they've done it enough that there's regular supply of water. They've learned that over time. And the requirement for water, Your Honor, under one, can't read it, for water 1U, or 1C, 1L, is that an L? Water, Your Honor, made regularly available. Okay, there's no requirement that the water is constantly available, just regularly available. And I think the cat's behavior indicates that it is regularly available because they all knew that when she walked over to the fish, that that's what was happening next.
I don't know that them running to a water dish means that they know that it's available. It could be that they're thirsty.
Certainly they were thirsty, Your Honor. That's why they ran to it.
Right.
But the
Doesn't
fact that
mean
they
that
ran to it is that because they know that's where the water is and they don't.
The court can't draw a conclusion that that means that they're regularly getting water because they ran to the water dish when someone stood there.
All right, well, I'll let the court consider the entire set of circumstances, Your Honor. Certainly the good health of the animals that were there. None of them were behaving as if they had suffering any consequences of thirst deprivation, water deprivation. They were all in good health. They were all running around ambulatory, eager to participate and interact with humans. There's really no indication here that he had failed to provide adequate care. The testimony also was that there was food dishes and water dishes present, which means that that's what they're using them for. They wouldn't leave water dishes out if they weren't using water dishes. So there's plenty of evidence that they have water bowls, they have food, they have shelter. She was worried that the pig didn't have any shelter. If you look at the picture of the pig, it's a beautiful sunny spring day, and they've got the pig out in a fenced-in area. It doesn't mean that he's deprived of shelter. It means he's just out in the yard during the 1 or 2 minutes she observed him there. And there was no need for him to have any shelter at that particular moment. All the animals were surrendered to the officer that day, so there was really no long-term evaluation done by the officer about how well they were being cared for. It was just a snapshot picture of a house that smelled of ammonia from urine, and at least at the moment she arrived there, some of the dishes were empty. Thank you.
Thank you. Any re-argument?
Well, I think it's important, Your Honor, to understand that adequate care means maintaining an animal in a state of good health. So the fact that, as Mr. Abbott says, she may be there and see a snapshot of an animal at a certain point, maintaining that animal, Your Honor, would require the provisions listed, such as food, water, shelter, sanitary conditions, exercise, and veterinary medical attention. So we can't say that just because the animal was in good health at that moment, if one believes that it was, that therefore there was a proper and adequate care, because it's a maintenance. And obviously any animal that's living requires food and water and shelter and veterinary care. So adequate care is more than just how is it doing at this moment. It is how is this animal maintaining that health. And certainly based on the conditions described and the lack of provisions provided, he was not providing for those animals to maintain them in a good state or a state of good health. So we'll ask the court again to make that bind over to the circuit court.
Thank you. Today was a day. Preliminary examination, and the burden at the time of preliminary examination is that of probable cause. The probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause to charge this defendant with the crime. And that's a standard that requires more than mere suspicion that a suspect committed a crime, but it needs some information to support those suspicions. We had testimony today from Officer Joe Blonsky. She provided information about reporting to an address on Highwood, City of Lansing, Ingham County. And that would make venue in this court appropriate. She indicated she reported because of a welfare check of some animals. She described the conditions of the home, or the conditions of how the animals were being sheltered. and the conditions that she noted some of the animals to be, and she was also clear that she's not a veterinarian. She couldn't testify as to whether or not these animals or some of the animals were in good health. There was at least one animal, a rat, that had a neck or head tilt, which would indicate some kind of medical or health emergency. And per the statute, adequate care means the provision of sufficient food, water, shelter, sanitary conditions, exercise, veterinary medical condition in order to maintain an animal in a good state of good health. There was testimony, and there's an exhibit here. There was testimony about feces and a litter box or litter boxes being filled. I see a picture here which would identify that. And what appears to be feces around the floor area where the litter box is kept. There's an exhibit E that has a picture. I believe these are two gerbils. There's some condensation. There was testimony about there not being water. There was argument that there could have been water. That sounds like that's a question to flag for the finder of fact. There's no water then, and it sounds like there was some testimony that there was a caseworker, a social worker that appeared that maybe 12 to 15 hours prior to that, and there was no water then either. Then there's probable cause to believe that there was not being sufficient water provided, at least during that 15-hour period. So the court is satisfied that there's sufficient probable cause to bind over as to count one animal, abandoning cruelty to 4 to 10 animals. And this matter will be bound over to the circuit court for a bind over date of November 17th. You do not need to appear in court on that date. This is the date they're going to get the file from this court. Once they receive the file, I'll let Mr. Abbott know of your next court date, which will be a pretrial and circuit court. Okay, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Current bond was at 1,000 personal recognizance. That will continue. Any additional matters for the record?
Your Honor, I would ask, if it was not addressed initially, that the bond be modified to include a condition that during the pendency of this case, given that there may be some time that passes between now and final disposition at circuit court, that Mr. Siafi not be allowed to obtain or keep any animals at his residence.
Mr. Abbott?
Thank you, Your Honor. I visited the residence yesterday. They have a cat or two. One cat, Your Honor. I think part of the problem here, if there was one at all, was just the sheer number of animals. And I'm confident he can keep a cat healthy and adequately cared for. I ask the court to allow him to maintain that pet in the home during the pendency of the case.
At the time that he was arraigned, it was noted here that he was not allowed to be in the care, control, possession of any domestic animals, with the exception of one cat, toothless. Is that the cat? Okay, so I will not make a modification to that. That's the only animal you're allowed to keep, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
No problem. Any additional matters for the record?
Nothing for the people, Your Honor. Thank you.
Nothing for the defense. Thank you.
Thank you. We're off the record. Here's your exhibit, Mr. Abbott.
Thanks.
And Mr. Siafi. Are we still waiting for conflict counsel on his pretrial, on his,
I think we are, Your Honor,
okay.
on the tattoo case.
We're gonna give you a new date on that one, sir. Well, that's gonna be a pretrial, so it's gonna be on a Monday.
November 22nd, 9:30.
It's gonna be November 22nd at 9:30. Sounds good.
Thank you, and I did hear that.
No problem.
Well, just a second.
Here, give him a copy of this notice to appear.